Jump in and just, your thesis is spot on. You know, there is a middle of the road technology required. That's not narrowband, 25, 50 kilohertz. That's not wideband. And WiMAX really starts at about 3 megahertz. I've never heard of anyone getting below 3 megahertz. The technology, the standard, was built around 1.25 megahertz, but actually it's unimplementable. We tried, so you can't get much below 3 megahertz. And there is definitely a case for something in the middle. Problem is, where do you go and do the work to create that, and how much effort is it? And the answer is it's probably quite a lot of effort, because again, you know, the fundamentals of scalable OFDMA, which is, you know, WiMAX, is that we've got at least 512 tones. Now, I could lament history. You know, there was I can't help myself. There was a 256 tone version of WiMAX for those of us with long memories. That was, for some particular reason, I can't remember what it was at the time, was kind of scuppered in terms of backwards compatibility. If we hadn't have done that, we would have had a way to get down to 256, to get down to at least a 125 megahertz channel, but that was then, and it is now.
So also, to your point about what are the vendors or what are the manufacturers doing, when you look at producing new product, you have to look worldwide, you have to globally as to what is going to work across the globe and not necessarily a niche. A company like GE obviously isn't going to build a business case around something that is spectrum available that's very expensive only to specific utilities. We're looking for what's a wide market base and how many players are able to play in that space, who's available to buy that, and again, how can we interoperate with other suppliers now? That's one of the magic bullets for 802.16e is interoperability, so you have choice across suppliers. You don't get locked into one supplier. Same as the meters have gone over the years. That's why we have ANSI and IAC.
Any other questions related to spectrum? Maybe we kind of beat that one to death here. Would anyone like to address any of these other issues up here? I get a lot of, on the OpenSG meetings and so on, I would say that there seems to be a lot of concern about how they're going to cover these rural areas. That's a spectrum-related issue too, having the right kind of spectrum available. But the big thing there is that you got customers that are spread miles and miles apart, and from an economics point, you look at it on the cost of the infrastructure on a per customer basis. It looks a little bit not very cost effective. So.
But make that very real. At 3650, which in a rural area is generally not that congested.
Yeah.
50 megahertz work, right? Is the business case working for the utilities that you're working with? Compared to what their other options are, obviously.
Yeah, so we have deployments very large. Centerpoint Energy is a very large deployment for WiMAX at the D standard. We have some municipalities who are deploying the 802.16e for AMI, as well as for backhaul and for distribution automation. It's working out well for them. So again, you know, if some of it goes into the propagation, it goes into the system design. And because we have a wider portfolio of products, we're able to access narrowband when needed as well. So we can pull in some unlicensed narrowband to produce a solution that works across the band.
But I think this is when, you know, this is why, for example, in our requirements document we're identifying a relay case, and that's why 802.16, you know, PNN exists, is because actually to solve, you know, number 3 on the list here, it isn't just, you can't do it with a single point to multi-point system. The relay concept, you know, is necessary. Now, I think the answer is there is spectrum you can use, and there's probably in rural areas, even on an unlicensed basis, it's okay because the risk of being overbuilt is very low. But there is an architectural requirement to be able to do relay effectively and operate the application when you're doing that relay at the same time. And I think that's got to be a long-term goal of where we take, you know, a WiMAX system profile is supporting relay, because if we don't do that, actually you don't really have an economic architecture. Because I think the secret sauce with relay is the business case can work if it's done right. Whereas if you build conventional cellular network, you know, conventional sites, it won't work. So what you need is technology that can go on your distribution hubs and follow, if you like, where the electricity goes, and only build, where there's electricity. Not build, in huge fields where there isn't anything. You don't need to do that. It needs to be incredibly lightweight. So that's the long-term solution, is a way to do relay.
Yeah, but I think before even coming to what technology will meet that need, we're also being asked, do I need connectivity in some of those rural places? Right? Is it for metering purposes? Well, why am I going to do smart metering in a totally rural place? Or do I really need distribution automation on a random feeder span going into a small hut somewhere? So part of that needs to be rationalized first before you say, well, this is a technology solution that I'm going to pick. I think there's many instances where we're talking to clients who will say, you know what, I might as well just keep giving that electricity away for free, because the cost of either sending a meter reader out and or the cost of putting in even a linear relay type systems, just for the amount they consume, it's not worth it. But there has to be some other business case that says, yeah,
and I think it's fair to say if that was 5% of the population, that might be a reasonable stat.
Sure, but
20%
20%
is an awful lot of voters.
That's right.
An awful lot of voters can tell that they don't matter because they live in rural areas.
That's right.
But I think, Bob, you're not talking about a U.S. When you characterize the giving away for free, are you talking emerging markets like India?
Well, that's a different situation too. Yeah, absolutely. Emerging markets and or some sketchy markets where you've got pockets of neighborhoods where you typically need 3 or 4 people to go in to read a meter because one guy's a reader and 2 guys are carrying guns. We've got examples of that in reality today. So it's going to vary quite a bit, but I think when you rationalize it and you do agree that you need a connectivity solution, I think something along the lines of what was mentioned here is typically what makes sense, right? You don't need to overbuild. You really just need to build a linear path because that's where the electricity flows and that's really where people will be.
But a lot of these smart grid deployment is driven by mandates and regulations sometimes. The utility doesn't have the freedom to decide where to have connectivity and where not to. And also to the point earlier about service provider connectivity, right? Again, go to the rural areas, that's not available, right? So that is exactly where they need a private network more than anywhere else. So I think trying to come up with a solution for addressing rural coverage is, I think it's very important from a private network standpoint.
Yep. I mean, there's state legislation in lots and lots of places, famous state legislation that requires anybody can request a smart meter, and it has to work. Utility, regulated utility, has no choice. And even though it can end up paying 10 times or 100 times what it pays to put one in an urban area, it's the law. So there's no way around that. And you just get, if you like, stuck having to do that problem. It's certainly in the US that's a problem they have to solve. And that's why I think, again, we've got to come up with an architecture. And it's not like we're not doing it. I mean, we've got a standard. It's a matter of when in the roadmap do we do this.
Well, speaking of regulations too, I think there's a lot of variety in the regulations from state to state. For example, Pennsylvania, the regulation says customers have to be presented with their usage data at specific intervals within a specific period of time. They're not saying you need smart meters. They're saying make that data available. Now, technologically, how do you make it available? Most likely it's through an advanced metering solution, but you can have a fast meter reader who's just, running around the town all day long taking reads and somehow sending it back. So that's part of the problem too. We've got state-by-state regulations that aren't always consistent, which also makes it difficult for, especially utilities that are spanning multiple states or spanning multiple utility commissions. How do you come up with a consistent solution? You can't until you get some better clarity on a macro level.
And I think that's part of the issue. If there isn't consistency of the solution, if there isn't standardization to a degree of the use cases, it makes it extremely difficult from a vendor point of view to work out what solutions to provide. It's very, very easy to say, I define whatever I need and people will build it, but it goes back to the economics of trying to get that done. And so understanding what has to get done and how it needs to get done actually helps the vendor community through a standards body actually provide solutions, and not just a single vendor solution, but multiple vendor solutions. So again, you have choice, and then that gives you longevity in your solution pick.
I think Scott, just switching to marketing campaign here from the WiMAX Forum perspective. I mean, the WiMAX Forum is going to try and say, here's a bunch of use cases, and here's a solution, and here's a bunch of products that are interoperable. I mean, that is the goal of what the Smart Grid Working Group is about. It's about saying, here is a unified way to solve this application problem with a bunch of interoperable equipment where there's a reasonable ecosystem associated with it for, you know, a range of applications. I mean, that's our absolute stated goal. And so, you know, we've got to finish the process here, but we're in that process. And, you know, again, I think we're always looking for utilities to help us make sure that we've captured their requirements correctly. But we're on that track.
And just to, you know, again, continue the advert going since we're on that page. That's why Newnet, so my company, joined the WiMAX Forum. So we proactively joined. We weren't beaten to join because we felt the standards body looking for common solutions is exactly the right way to go, not just for the US, but as a global-based industry. And that's why we have joined, why we spend money in that whole area and make commitments to make this happen. So yes, I think more linkage into UTC, utilities in particular, I think actually is a very strong draw, and is good for us as a vending company to provide solutions, but it's good for the overall industry.
So I see that the first target of interoperability sort of the workshop is in August at the Tennessee facility. So is the idea to have a permanent setup for you to continuously do this as you go through new releases and so on, or this is a one-time affair and then you're going to have, you know, regroup later on?
So Declan, you can jump in here, but I'll have to go first. So no, the goal is to start what we call inside of, you know, the WiMAX Forum a Plugfest series of Plugfests. And what this allows us to do is vendors can bring their equipment to an event we hold, and the event is 3 or 4 days. And Tim gracefully at EPRI, the Electrical Research Institute, is going to host us in one of their labs. And basically what we'll do is we'll bring equipment together, you know, and we will pick some use case scenarios, and we will show that multiple base stations and multiple CPE types are interoperable together for these particular applications. And, you know, it's a relatively open participation. We're having, you know, pretty much any vendor can bring base station equipment, you know, endpoint device equipment into one of those events. The actual, what goes on in the event, what works and doesn't work, is completely private and confidential. But at the end of the event, we summarize on a non-specific basis the results that we've got. And, you know, the series is, you know, evolved. You know, we do the simple things first, and then we get into more and more layers, more and more detail as we go up. And we get to a point where we can, you know, we can say that we have interoperability, and we can list the number of vendors' names that have interoperability. If, and only if, we get to that point, there is then obviously the opportunity down the track to do certification as well. You know, when we reach some point of interoperability, we can then launch, as WiMAX Forum has done before, a certification program which allows any vendor to turn up with some equipment, give it to a lab, they check it for conformance, they check it for interoperability, it gets a stamp. And you know, the value proposition then to utilities is if you buy something with the stamp on, you know, it's going to be plug and play. As much as anything nowadays is plug and play, but it's going to be plug and play, and it you know, assures them that when they buy into the overall ecosystem, they're not, you know, locked up.
I guess, I mean, I make one just further comment, if I may, on that one, which is I wouldn't make the assumption that because the Plugfest, I'm not sure I particularly like that phrase, but anyway.
Lots of people don't.
Because the Plugfest has not occurred yet, that there isn't already a WiMAX smart metering industry. Because there absolutely is. It's global, it's big, and it's growing, but this is part of going back to making sure that a standards-based approach actually protects investment decisions which are made. So it's out there, it's live, it's happening right now. Many parts of the world, we've heard about it the last couple of days here, and it's live and well, but we want to drive more conformance in that approach, and hence this is an excellent opportunity for the WiMAX Forum to come in and provide that level of confidence and credibility back into the business.
With the aviation working group and then the other task task forces, I imagine, right, that's enough scale that you could rationalize a full-on certification lab, whatever you want to call it, because the other industries are going to ask for something similar too.
For sure. Well, I have a question, King, on that. I mean, NewNet, GE, PureWave have just joined the forum in the last 6 months, I guess. To the extent that that decision was generated because of interest in the smart grid business, and there's probably multiple businesses you all approaching, how do you all feel about the smart grid business and WiMAX's relevance to it, not only in the U.S., but we haven't really talked international a whole lot. And I know Australia's here, and that's great, but if you could speak to other...
I'll speak to the process for GE.
Yeah.
Because I was the champion for that. We have had WiMAX products for the past 7, 8 years.
Right.
We've had very large deployments, and we weren't a member of the WiMAX forum. And I went to UTC Canada, and I had a couple of customers come to me and say, how in the world can you not support the standards? And being a former standards manager for a utility, I said, you're right.
That's a great question.
What a great question. And so I went back to my management and I started to sponsor and champion the joining of the WiMAX forum. And of course, as you know, we met back in October in Atlanta for a meeting. And as with everything, it takes some time to get through the right processes. But we told the story and up the food chain, as they say at GE, and received the sponsorship and the ability to join. And we are now, we're planning to get more involved, and we support it wholeheartedly. We see WiMAX as a communications option going forward for the next X number of years.
Okay.
So it's not something that's going to fade away and LTE takes over. We see it as a viable option because we're in the other vertical markets like mining, oil and gas, and heavy industrial.
And that was part of my question too. Compared to LTE or Wi-Fi or whatever, is WiMAX sufficiently robust business to warrant your investment in my organization, for example, and a utility's investment in technology?
I think from PureWave standpoint, we see this expanding our business. We're a broadband provider. 99% of our customer base is broadband. We talk about rural America. That's where I'm at. I mean, I deploy CLECs, electrical co-ops. Is a small segment, some military bases and so on for SCADA, oil fields, but primarily in broadband. If I can deliver broadband, 30 kilometers out, like we can do a pretty good job delivering the ability to connect to these meters. If we continue to work on the latency issues and those types of things, I think WiMAX has a long way of serving that particular market. We just need some help and organization, I think, from the community and the UTC to help us along in that area.
I think from my side, well, we just bought WiMAX,
Right.
so we clearly believe in this opportunity. Most of the acquisition that we did to acquire the technology, quite frankly, was mostly telecom-based, last mile, semi-nomadic, nomadic applications. We have over 40 customers, just south of 30 countries around the world that we're operating this stuff in. But it was very clear very quickly to us that the opportunity for WiMAX is actually moving much more into the vertical space. It's absolutely obvious, not just because we already had some customers in this space, but it was intuitively obvious from a mature, standards-based technology with a good, solid ecosystem is a smart investment decision to be made. Its flat IP architecture that was discussed earlier enables the kind of application that smart metering really works for. And we're not just talking about smart metering as reading the meter. It's the balance of supply and demand actually in the overall system. It's knowing the demand that's being laid on you and then being able to go to the wholesale market and do that in real time helps you actually drive a successful business model. And we see that when we talk about smart metering. We see smart metering in municipality areas. This is all intertwined. Smart cities, for us, this all fits together. And flat IP architecture, OFDM-based technology, same as LTE. You don't get anything exciting on the radio side particularly. Really works for us. And so if you're going to make work and you want to be in the game, then for us, it was critical that WiMAX had a solid industry body. And so we felt we had to step up and support that, and we'll continue to do that because it's right for our customers.
So Declan, also to answer the question about LTE versus WiMAX, because it comes up a lot, obviously it came up in this conference. You know, we're a vendor, we make both LTE equipment and WiMAX equipment, and whilst, you know, with incremental development, LTE can eventually be adapted, you know, and end up looking pretty much like WiMAX does today. The truth is, WiMAX, you know, came from a different home. It came from a different stable. It grew out of IEEE, and you know, primarily it's a wireless Ethernet bridge, and we never lost that capability. We never lost an Ethernet convergence sublayer. And when you architect real networks, and when you're looking at many of these applications, the ability to architect it, you know, on an Ethernet basis is just fundamental. It's just fundamental for this space and for these applications. And it really, because you know the way the telcos are evolving LTE to their needs, it is frankly unlikely they're going to circle back and build something that is a direct equivalent to WiMAX anytime soon. Of course, you know, there's a grey area here, and a number of applications are easy to do, and then as you get more, you know, but you know, it is just a different solution, and it's a solution. You know, WiMAX today is the perfect fit for this type of space, and providing the ecosystem strong enough. You know, there's no reason why we're not here in 10 years' time. I mean, because you know, LTE's a different solution for a different problem space, and I think that's the basis.
So I have a question for the audience. So who represents interests outside of U.S. or Canada in this group? Either you're a supplier or you're a consumer. Okay. So what's in your geography or country? You know, what's different, or what's the concern point? Is it spectrum? Is it coverage? Is it technology? Is it the same as what we see here in the U.S. or Canada?